Hey guys, Zach Butler YGO, back with a updated Spright deck. There was a couple requests to see the Spright deck that I have been working on a little bit. This is probably, if I had played in a VIP qualifier over the weekend, what I would have played. But I'm not planning to play in YCS Philly, so I felt there was no need to go to one and potentially rob the spot of somebody who would be going. But yeah, I'll just kind of go into it. It's a very basic Spright deck, but there's a couple of changes that I've made with the update to the format that I feel like maybe might make some sense or maybe not to some people, and might be fun to explore and explain. So I'll just jump into it. As always, if you like this kind of content, let me know with a comment down below, and make sure to like and hit the notification, or to subscribe and hit the notification bell as well. That helps out tremendously. And if you want any of the cards found in this video, make sure to use the affiliate link in the description below. A portion of that does go to the channel, so you're helping me while helping yourselves, and that means the most. So we'll go into the deck. First up, for the sprites, you have your 3 Spright Blue, of course, 3 Spright Jets, and then 2 Spright Red, 2 Spright Carrot, and a Pixies. So a pretty heavy Spright engine compared to most. I mean, it's 3 extra sprites, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that does add up to drawing them more often. One of the biggest changes I noted with the shift in the way the deck has to play without Elf is that you need extra copies of Red and Carrot just to be able to consistently have the bodies to special summon, which is also why Pixies is there. You just want to have more copies of Spright monsters, more names, things like that. Because you're not getting to use these ones on a loop. You're not able to bring them back every turn, same with Blue and Jet. You're not able to bring them back and get a bunch of free value that way, so you need to have the extra copies, making it a little less strong in the grind, like a little weaker in the grind game, but also your openings can be a little bit more consistent across the board because you're going to see a special summon Spright more often. So that was the Spright monsters. Then I played 2 Kashtira Fenrir, just as like a generic special summon monster. These honestly were probably the 39th and 40th cards in the deck. I considered cutting them for additional defensive cards. So if you don't have them, that's always an option. I just wanted to have like a good generic card to summon by itself, and that was Fenrir. And then 3 Nimble Beaver, 2 Nimble Angler, and then 1 Iperia, as well as 1 Melffy Caddy and 1 Melffy Penny. So these are the additional level 2s that are played. The Nimble engine is still the best normal summon engine that you can have in the Spright deck. I did have a consideration for the Live Twins, but I felt like those worked better with the Runic cards because then you're playing more of a Runic Live Twin deck. I also considered the Sacred Beast engine, the Dark Beckoning Beast, plus Spirit Opening of the Spirit Gates. That was another consideration to play with Capshell as well, actually. And then just have like a Dark Fiend based one. But I didn't really like how that opened me up to Super Poly even more. And I felt like Super Poly would be a little bit better going forward. And that engine had some issues on its own where like Dark Beckoning Beast is great, but it's only, you really only want to see the one, like the first copy, and then you have to play an actual Garnet, whereas like these are normal summons, so there's a couple issues with that. The Iperia is in here because I actually don't play Pot of Prosperity at all. I am trying it without it, and I wanted to have a good level 2 to summon off of Gigantic Spright, because one of the other issues is that you don't actually have that many good level 2s to summon, because like these, obviously you want to normal summon Beaver, summon Angler, and then go into Sprint, send the second Angler, special summon the next 2 Beavers, and then you're out of 2s to summon, and you don't want to ever summon the Melffys because you actually want to search these off of the what is it called? Joyous Melffys? Is that what it's? Melffy of the Forest. I get them mixed up all the time. The Melffy Xyz monster, you want to search the Melffy off of that, so you want to leave those in the deck. And I just wanted to have a good level 2 that I could summon off of Gigantic Spright that got me a little bit more advantage. I tried Soul Scissors at first. I wasn't really a fan of it. I I tried Cap Shell, wasn't really a fan of it in this kind of deck, whereas like, because Cap Shell it doesn't have like an immediate value, whereas Hyperia does, and Hyperia also has value when it's drawn by itself. Cap Shell doesn't. So that's why I went with those. And the reason for the Melfi engine is just because it's layered interaction, and that's one of the things that I really like about this deck is that you're trying to layer your interactions with like the Melfi engine, the red and the carrot negate. You can maybe have pixies for battle tricks, and then I play a bunch of power spells as well. So you have layers of interaction there, and I really like that a lot in a deck like this where you're trying to kind of combat them. If you watched my Master Duel Spright deck where I played it for the Duelist Cup in Stage 1, it's actually very similar to that in concept, where you're trying to shut down as much as you can within reason on the first turn if you don't go first, and then you use like Gamma Burst to kill them, or if you go first you set up layers of interruption, and then on your next turn you have a much stronger chance of being able to push to end the game because you don't have as strong of a grind game necessarily as the other decks in the format. Because Kashtira obviously with Birth just gets incremental advantage. The longer the game goes, the better Birth gets. The Naturia Runic deck gets more advantage the longer the game goes. Same with every Naturia or every Runic deck just gets more value the longer the game goes. Whereas this one, you're trying to end games pretty quickly. So like your cards have to have like you want to have the layers of interaction and hope that you need to use them correctly just to make sure that the opponent can't really do anything. And for those who may not necessarily be the most familiar with what the Melfis do, Melfi Caddy is the one that you're going to want to end with. You special summon it in your end phase, and then when your opponent normal or special summons a monster or attacks the Caddy, you return it to hand, and then you add a beast to your hand. So generally you're going to add Melfi Penny. However, you can also, if you draw the Penny, it's actually not terrible because you can add Nimble Beaver and give yourself an additional follow-up. But so then what Penny does is if you've returned a Melfi to your hand that turn, you can special summon it, and then immediately afterwards synchro summon using only it and Melfi cards in your hand. So you're going to go into either a, what is it called? The Merry Melfis or your Herald of the Arclight. Those are the two that you'll go into. And I'll get into, you know, the scenarios in which each one of those is more beneficial than the other one later on. But that's the point of the Melfi engine. And then I only played Ash Blossom for a monster hand trap. This is really, it's more of like a power spell Spright deck, kind of like Joshua's was from back at Euros. But I wanted Ash in there just because I knew Branded would be pretty popular, and it's just generically strong. And also, hitting Kashtira Theosis, I feel like, is so valuable that playing a mid-value card like Ash Blossom is worthwhile. Generally, I don't typically like playing cards like Ash Blossom and things like that unless I'm playing a ton of hand traps, because then it being a mid-value card, it gains more value that way, in that your opponent's hand is already weaker because you've had so many points of interaction. But Ash Blossom just has a few key interactions in the format that I felt like were so important that it was worthwhile to play, and I was pretty happy I played it, but for the spells, I played 3 Triple Tactics Talent, and 3 Econ. First up for like the big power spells. I really like these cards, especially this format. Arise Heart means that Talents, if you're going second, is always live against that deck. Enemy Controller gets value because you're playing Fenrir. You can like steal their Fenrir, and if you can stop them from like establishing an Arise Heart, like if they go summon Fenrir and then they search, or like their hand is weak and they have to, or they go like, basically if they end with Fenrir. I don't really remember the situation offhand, but there was a situation where I had my opponent end with a Fenrir, and I summoned my monster, activated it. I summoned Nimble Beaver, activated its effect, summoned Angler. They activated Fenrir, targeting my Beaver. I activated Econ, chained, took the Fenrir, searched my own Fenrir, and then made Sprint and got to pop off. That was really good. This card just gains a lot of value that way. It also helps the OTKs, which this deck is very adept at doing. Because I'm not playing Prosperity, I definitely want to max out on Talents, because I'm not going to see some of these cards as often as I might by being able to see 6 deep with Prosperity. I need to increase the percentage of seeing them in the opening hand, which is why you see like 3 Econ, 3 Talents. And then 3 starter, because it's, you know, it is literally a starter. 1 smashers. This is, funnily enough, I think probably the worst card in the deck. I found myself almost never wanting it, which is crazy because I used to be a firm believer that smashers was just like this underrated card that you should be playing multiple of. But I found that in the current format, you're not going to want to banish a target on your field and theirs that often. You'd rather just kind of break their field apart and go from there. So Smashers was okay, but it was definitely the card that probably underperformed the most for me. Then we have Gamma Burst. This card is insane. Just so you know, if your opponent leaves their field, if you can get your opponent to an open field, Gigantic Spright with just regular materials, Jet, and Blue is with Gamma Burst is 8,200 damage, I believe. It's over 8,000, but not enough to kill through a 500 life point gain. So Gamma Burst is really easy to pull off OTKs with, and I really I liked having it. Generally, most of the time when you play Gamma Burst, you could probably still be winning that game anyway, just by outgrinding them. But I didn't want to risk getting into a grind game and having them be able to crack the setup I do and then be able to establish a field where I can't win. So I just wanted to be able to end games really quickly, and having a searchable bomb like that was really good. And then Harpy's Feather Duster, because most of the interactions you're going to find right now are spell and trap based, you know, your Book of Moon, Book of Eclipse, Infinite Impermanence, things like that. And I just wanted to have that power spell just to be able to destroy them if I draw it. This would typically be like Call by the Grave or something. It's kind of like that flex power spell spot. And then there was Spright Double Cross. This card overperformed across the tournaments I've played so far. The level of flexibility it has in 3 different effects is really good. You're usually going to end with 2 Xyz and a Sprint on your field as long as they didn't break apart your setup. Even if they do stop your setup, you can usually end with like Melfi the Forest and either a rank 2 or a link 2 or just Melfi the Forest, and then you can just put the monster under that. This card is very, very good. And then 3 Infinite Impermanence was the other like hand trap I played. So give me 6 in the opening hand for just over a little over 50% to C1. The idea being that I'm not looking to stop their turn with the hand traps. I'm just looking to slow it down enough that the 6 power spells, as well as like the Cashier Fenrir's and the Nimble Engine and stuff like that, can push through their setup enough to win the game. So that's one thing to note, is that these don't have the same value. Same with the Ash Blossom. They don't have the same value that they might in other like heavier hand trap lineups, where, you know, like these are just like powerful hand traps that, you know, you want to save to get maximum value. You obviously want to save them to get maximum value, but you're not, the value is inherently different in that you're just looking to slow them down. Because once, if they have like a weak setup, you can usually break through it and then either push for game or have such a strong follow-up that they can't overwhelm you again. Because if you can break their field and then establish like a Melfi the Forest, a Herald of the Arclight play on their turn, as well as like a Red and a Carrot, they're probably not going to be able to do anything. So that was the main deck. It was 40 cards. Then we have the extra deck, which was 1 Herald of the Arclights, 1 Melfi, the Merry Melfi. So Merry Melfi's, what it does is on summon can bounce a card. I believe it's on summon. Yeah, you can target one face in the field, return face it monster in the field, return it to the hand. That's the only part that you care about, because you're never going to attribute this to summon the Melfi Xyz. But it gives you another layer of interruption, so you can summon and return a key monster to their hand, and they're shut down with that. Or if you think that the Omni Negate is going to be more necessary, you have the Herald of the Arclight as well. Both of these are obviously weak to battle, so that is something to keep in mind. Then I played 2 Gigantic Sprites. Gigantic Spright is an interesting one because most of the time in most Spright variants, if Gigantic gets stopped, a lot of the time your turn is pretty much done. In the Melfi version, if Gigantic Spright gets stopped, you're probably still fine. As long as you can get to the Melfi of the Forest, you're still totally fine if Gigantic doesn't resolve, because this will get you to a layered negate on their turn anyway. So that's something to keep in mind. Gigantic Spright loses a little bit of its like inherent value of stopping it. Then there's Melfi the Forest. This card's crazy. Lets you search out Melfi Caddy or Penny. And then what it does is when a Melfi monster is returned to your hand, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls, negate its effects, and then it can't attack. So you can stop a Fenrir from being able to crack your board. You can shut down an Arise Heart that's already used its effect, and then you have your graveyard, things like that. There's a lot of really cool little valuable plays you can do there. This card is really good. And it's got 2,000 defense, which is surprisingly large. Shadow Mosquito for the OTKs. I did this a lot, actually. That's one of the ways that you beat the Cashier deck is you force out their interactions, and then if you can get the body, you can just summon this, and then start swinging into a Rise Heart, and 3 attacks is going to be game. Onibimaru Soul Sweeper card is very good. Don't think I need to explain that one. Mannequin Cat. This one's... I never summoned it, but it's mostly for like if they Dimension Shifter me, I can summon back their Dimension Shifter, and then I can summon like a blue and a jet and go off from there. It never really happened, but it was just something to keep in mind. And then Downward Magician and Double Zeus for the Xyz. I don't think I ever needed the second Zeus, but it's really kind of just there to... The reason for the second Zeus really was there just to prevent them from being able to banish the one and not having access to it. It might just be that I was a coward and it was incorrect. I'm not totally sure. But that's something to note, is that I personally have never summoned the second Zeus. Oh, no, I did once. I actually summoned Zeus over Zeus one time. But that was really weird game state, and I don't think that would be, like, that's the exception of the rule. And then 2 Sprites Sprint. Obviously, its Foolish Burial effect is really good, but its other effect is one of the big reasons that you're able to get so far ahead, because oftentimes you're going to end with Spright Sprint, Melfi of the Forest, and Gigantic Spright on the field. And these will have materials under them, obviously. But then when they special summon a monster, you can Sprint, detach material from either one of these, and return the monster that they summon to the hand. So that's an interrupt, and then you have the Melfi of the Forest negating a card as an interrupt when you return your Caddy, which is an interrupt, and then you potentially have like a red and carrot, so you just have and double cross. So you have so many layers of interruption potentially with the econ and stuff as well, that it's very hard to play through all of that. And Sprint actually gets a lot of value because of the Melfi engine just being as good as it is. And then I played IP Masquerena just to have as a good generic link 2, and Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. This card was surprisingly good, both on my turn and my opponent's turn. On the opponent's turn, generally, if you summon like the IP, the time to wait, or the time to do the Underworld Goddess, if you can, is if they're gonna like Theosis or something, you can summon this, and then they've lost their target, so they can't summon off the Theosis. But generally, it's just a good card, and being able to be unaffected by cards unless they specifically target it is really good. It's just a good card to summon off of the IP. Side deck. This is probably what I feel like needs the most work. There's stuff I really liked in here and stuff that just I really didn't like, and I'll go over each of those. One thing I really liked a lot was the 3 Godarla. So the reason for Godarla specifically is because of Shadow Mosquito, actually. So with Godarla, if you Godarla and then Shadow Mosquito, you only need to attack into the Godarla and burn 3 times for game, because it's 27. So 27 plus 27 is 54, plus 27 more is 81. So that's actually just 3 attacks will be game. And it's also level 8, which is really good, because that means that it doesn't work well with the Kashtira monsters, obviously. Just wanted to clarify that as to why that over Gamma Steel, which is the weakest kaiju and generally is the best one. It's because you want the higher attack. And Radiant would be incorrect because it's a level 7. So if you can't clear it, then you run into an issue where suddenly you've given them a level 7. Kumungus is just too small, and the other ones are too big, and you would take too much damage. 3 Kurikara Div Incarnate. This is a card I'm very back and forth on. In theory, it's really good. In practice, it's been very mediocre. And that's just my experience with it so far. Hasn't really been that incredibly powerful. I think I've used it once. I often found that it was sitting dead in my hand because of all the interactions that I had. So it may be something else. It may be better just to cut it all together. I'm not totally sure what I would put in for it, but it was kind of like Kaiju's 4, 5, and 6 as well. One card I was a very big fan of is Nightmare Corruptor Ibli. This is a card that has rotated in and out of the format. I feel like it's in a place where you could play it again because of the lack of preparation for Ibli. We've hit that cycle of the format where maybe now Ibli goes back in because no one's playing around Ibli, and then as soon as it goes back in, we stop playing it because everyone's playing around it. So that's something to consider. And when you have like enemy controller and stuff like that, you can also make sure that your opponent can't attack into your monster, because there were a couple times where I would give them the Ibli, they would then switch to attack, and I would just switch it back to defense, and then their whole turn just ended. So that's something to consider as well. I really liked that card a lot though. Red Resonator, I actually ended up liking it specifically, hilariously enough, because it summoned a second monster from my hand, which ended up being useful more often than I realized. Marauding Captain in 2023 is surprisingly really good. I don't know if you need any time tricks with this deck in the form of Red Resonator, but that's something that I wanted to have just in case. I don't believe I ever went to time. I went to time with the deck once, and it ended up being a draw. And there was a match I actually should have won because I realized that I misplayed game 1 due to tunnel visioning on not being able to attack 3 times with my Shadow Mosquito OTK plan, and I just, I was looking at the paper and it didn't click in my head that they were at a lower life point total than I realized. So, anyway, this card was pretty solid. Doesn't really need discussion. Then there's Call by the Grave. This is for if I'm playing against the more hand trap heavy version of Kashtira. It's also just good against like Dark World and things like that. I just wanted to have it in the deck somewhere. Usually gets swapped out for Harpy's Feather Duster. And then for going first, there's 3 anti-spell fragrance. Everything in the format is spell-based at this point. You've got the Runic decks, you've got the Kashtira decks that play a bunch of spells, you've got Dark World, which doesn't necessarily have the most spells, but can be a little spell reliant. You've got Branded, obviously. Labyrinth doesn't really lose to the anti-spell because they don't use spells. But there was just enough spell-based play that I felt like it got a lot of value. And then I cited 3 evenly matched for when I go second. I don't know that I ever ended up siding into evenly matched. I'm still working on, the side patterns with this deck. But evenly matched is just such a powerful card that it might be worth it just to play anyway, even if you're not necessarily sure what you're going to side. And actually, with that in mind, just to go over some of the siding patterns, going first, for example, I would side out. If I was going first, I generally sided out of Harpy's Feather Duster, and then Pixies, because I really only value this card when I was going second, so that's 2 of the 3. Because going first, I generally only side in these 4. And then I would side out of 1 Talents and 1 Enemy Controller, because I didn't necessarily want to draw these as much going first. If I'm gonna go for the Ibli lock, I leave the Enemy Controller in, because I want to make sure I have more copies of Enemy Controller to work with the Ibli. But so like that would go in for those. Going second against like Kashtira, I would side in to these 6, and I would side out 1 of each of these. Because of the percentage to see them is basically the same going second when you have 2 of as 3 when you go first. I'd side out of the Imperms, and then I would take out the Melfies. So you could either take out like one of these. You pick between which one of these you think is going to be more valuable. I was kind of up in the air. I think Talents is probably more valuable when you go second than Econ into the Kashtira deck. But like the Melfies would go out going second often, because you're never really going to probably get to do the Melfi play. And I'd side into these. Against back row decks, these would come in going second, and like these types of things would go out going in. Going first, you basically just leave your deck the way it is. Against Dark World, you're kind of just hoping that it works out. So the siding is kind of just up in the air. I don't really have much to say about that. Trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to note. I don't think so. So that's kind of it for now, guys. That's just this deck. I will also have a Dark World deck that I've been working on. There's a couple different versions, and I wanted to go over the simplistic deck building, like the KISS style of deck building. This deck actually exemplifies that perfectly in that it's just very simple. But I'll go into more depth into that subject on another video. I'll go into problem solving deck building soon as well. If you guys made it this far, thank you so much, and have a wonderful night.